maybe this comes right into this, like in terms of B
Yeah.
players, right? Because we covered
Yeah.
sort of like senior hires and the impact of
Yeah.
and well, in general, right? But especially senior hires, it's like, what's the impact of making a bad decision? And I know you're very passionate about this.
I'm extremely passionate. So this is the single hardest thing. Okay, so when we talk about senior players, because in my experience, almost everybody who's senior, it's political. Usually somebody knows the senior person, right? So there's this delicate dance of X worked with Y at a prior company, and you know what? Y's not too sharp. I like X, but Y's not too sharp. How do we gently give that feedback? And when in doubt, don't hire. Always default to interviewing somebody and always default to not hiring. So if you're not sure, that's a no. And you put it as delicately and politely as you can for a senior person. And yes, there's risk to it, but being wrong, having somebody bad come in will tank your company, right?
Yeah. And
for the senior people in charge, like, you have to make hard decisions. If this person's not succeeding, you want to come in right away. Yeah. But a key element of avoiding B players is it's actually interestingly more about the interviewers, right? If I'm going to a place and I'm being interviewed by a bunch of people who strike me as pleasant but not that great, I know what that place is. That's a place where a bunch of nice people do mediocre work, right? I want to be impressed by how smart my interviewers are, and I want to see interviewers from different disciplines. I like to see myself. This is another value of mine, is I like to see junior people interviewing me, because I want to see people coming in and learning how to interview. I make my junior people sit next to me in interviews. Then my rule of thumb in faster interview processes is watch me do one with me watching you, do one alone. And I actually have people at bigger companies over interview because I'm using it to calibrate who's a good interviewer. And I keep track of people, not necessarily as hardcore as a formal sheet because it's a little tricky, but I keep track of where somebody is different than the group on a hire, right? There's some people who's like, they're great. Everybody's like, nope, who cares? It's the ones where there's that debate, like this person, and where people have a genuine difference of opinion. I typically actually note and pay careful attention to who comes down on which side of those hotly debated candidates. And then I'm looking for trends. If the people who work out, and half those candidates work out, right? I'm looking to see who's consistently wrong. And that's something, there are people I've had that were very good. I wouldn't promote because they didn't hire well, in my opinion. And the thing is, if you hire badly, like once somebody starts, the reality is no matter how hardcore you are, it's very hard to get rid of somebody nice who's competent, right? It's very hard. Somebody you like, they're nice, and they're like, you're going to be like, they're really nice and their work's, it's fine, right? How many people have worked with people like that? Everybody. If your ears are burning, it's you and you need to be better. And I'm not joking, because what happens is those people inevitably get promoted. They're like, well, he's been here for X years. He's good, or she's nice.
Right.
Or, we need whatever. And then they hire people, and then they hire. I really love it when I see people who hire well. Right? When they're consistently hiring smart people. Like, I love hiring people who were smarter. And everybody says that, but I mean, do you?
Right.
Do you see it? And I'll tell you how I do that in my interview process. I have a very standard interview process. It's a question I've asked intentionally. I've asked this, some of the questions I've asked for years. And I give huge marks when somebody says something new and clever that I haven't heard before.
Originality.
Right? And so I have a standard one. And then what I typically do is I also have whatever is currently on my mind that I'm struggling with, that I want to discuss. I'll sort of genericize it in an interview. But so I have my standard questions, so I see how they do against my sort of mental benchmark of what good has looked like. And then I often interview on whatever one of the hard things on my mind is. I'm like, if it's a game designer, I'll be like, here's a game design question we're really struggling with. For example, if it's an engineer, I'm like, a game we're making right now it's a sort of solitaire meets bingo kind of game. So a design question that's interesting is, to me, these are hard questions for us. An example of a design question is, how do we properly teach people this variant mechanic that they haven't seen before? From an engineering standpoint, it's like, how do we determine whether this is a good hand, the seed of the hand that we use to generate the hand? How would you approach determining whether something was a good seed? And so these are things that I think about. And I'll ask that in addition to my benchmark question, but then I'll see, and I give huge marks when somebody says something or points out flaws in my own argument. I reward people who prove to me where I'm wrong, or they call something out. And I also do another thing, side note on this is drifting, but it's important, is I also try and accommodate style. as someone who's, I'm sure this is no surprise to anybody on this call, I'm a big extrovert, a good talker. Austin, clearly a good talker. Good talkers interview well. Introverts, in my experience, tend to be better employees. So what I tend to do is I want to, especially when I get it to whatever the hard part of the interview is, the sort of the serious question is, I'm going to like, I want you to take 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to actually leave the room, write on the page, write on the whiteboard, take your time to think, right? Because I want to give an introvert space to demonstrate how awesome they are. Because for games, it's more of an introvert profession than an extrovert.
I mean, to be honest, I've been in the hot seat of many, software engineering interviews and been sweating bullets, right? So I would have loved that. I think that's just like fantastic especially in technical interviews. I think everybody generally, I think, agrees that it's kind of broken, right? So stepping out like that in order to really see somebody's performance, somebody's mind, instead of kind of pressuring them and shutting them down. That's kind of the risk, right? Of not doing that, of just kind of being there and watching them intently.
And I will say, a side note, but my bias in engineering is you hire the best ones young because nobody lets the really great ones go. It's really hard to prior a really good engineer with you somewhere. Those are the people who they'll double the money or whatever. So I bias designers. I love hiring somebody else's designer where the designer's fed up with a bad company, or PMs I can just train. Engineers, I tend to want to hire them fresh out of school because people just don't cough up their stars. Engineering are actually pretty easy to quantify. People know they've got a good one when they have a good one. So it's hard to pry people out. Now there are exceptions. There's lots of good people. I love it when a company blows up cynically, because then that means some of the good engineers. I just have to guess which ones are the good engineers.
Yeah.
Right now with Facebook laying off, 11,000 people, and Twitter laying off half. There's a bunch of good people that they messed up on, right? There's a bunch of duds, not to be mean, and that sounds too harsh about the people. There are a bunch of people who are not great at their job, but there are going to be some excellent, excellent people who just were unlucky to be in a group that wasn't popular, or, just somebody made a decision above them. And so that's really, but the key with those B players is to be fairly brutal. And, up or out is a good rule for certain disciplines. Generally, it depends on your company, but another piece of that, sorry, I'm digressing just a tiny bit, but it's very important to have the individual contributor path. This is something Microsoft realized years ago, which is you don't want your engineers to think they have to be a manager to get promoted.
Yeah.
But I don't want to keep people who are happy being the same thing year after year.
I see in like staff level kinds of.
I want to see them like CTO types. It's like, is this somebody who takes ownership of code, who's like on the side? They're like, I did my stuff and this area of the code bugged me, so I cleaned it up. Right. I love that, because a lot of the really good engineers are very OCD and very thoughtful. I love it when I see signs of them doing stuff. That's something I look for in junior engineers. Right. Yeah. And they're thoughtful. Like, you can still communicate with them if you're a non-engineer like me. But so those are the kind of qualities that I'm looking for. But really the key with being ruthless with B players is try not to hire them because it's so hard to get rid of them, and don't promote them. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like you said, be a little bit ruthless in that way.
And if you catch yourself being like, but he's really nice, or she's awesome, or no.
It's problematic thinking.
Do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
You shouldn't hire them because they've failed. My whole interview process is designed at the first half is to get them to demonstrate the core skill I want. Typically, in my case, for most of the stuff, the ability to think rationally, the ability to analyze, create a game feature, analyze what's going on in a game, discuss an art style, decompose. I want to see the deconstruction of something, because construction is art and it's difficult. I want to see an artist rip apart what they don't like about a site. I could be like, what do you not like about this art game? Tell me what you would change about the UI of this, right? Tell me. So they've given that chance before I even ask them about themselves. I do that last in the interview. One other thing about B players, and this is interestingly, I think actually a good signal, is when people ask stupid questions, that's a sign of a B player. No questions or stupid questions are excellent B player signifiers.
I see.
Right? Because A players are thoughtful. A players think about it and they come in and they either want to know a lot because they're testing you, or they want to know a couple specific things because I think what the most important thing is. But when somebody has no questions or stupid questions, then that instantly puts up my B player radar.
I guess, what are some stupid questions, that would immediately flag, that thought for you?
So stupid questions are generic softballs like, how do you feel about diversity at your company? right? That's a stupid question because what is anybody going to say? Oh, we're very committed to it, blah, 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 blah. Useless. If someone says, how many women have you promoted? Or what's your ratio of female leads? Or do you have anybody trans in a leadership role at the company? That's a great question, right? It's not the topic. I mean, stupid stuff like, I presume most people are not dumb enough to be like, what's your vacation policy until the end of the interview, right? But like, it's, what's your diversity policy? How do you decide what games to make? Like, what is the version of that question? Because there are good versions of that question, and then there are stupid versions.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I don't believe at all. I think it's an utter waste of time for the, name a weakness for yourself. All you're testing, though, is whether somebody has read the books on how to answer that in a polished manner. That stuff's stupid.
It's kind of a trope for sure. Right? Yeah.
But the things I'll tell you what A players do. In addition to being awesome at the objectives, they've looked everybody up on LinkedIn. They've played the product. They've thought about what the business is like. They'll be like, well, who are your competitors? Which competitor are you most afraid of? Right? Those are good questions. That shows me that somebody's thinking in a critical manner. And if they ask enough dumb questions, I probably won't hire them in any discipline because it worries me. It tells me they're focused on stupid things. And if they ask enough good questions, then I'll err on the side of giving them a chance. I can tell you one guy I think of at Zynga who ended up doing very well. He had answered the PM question. He knew he didn't get it right. He tracked me down 2 hours later after I was like his second interview. He came and tracked me down. He's like, I thought about it. It's this. And that literally was the difference in me giving the yes vote to hire him.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. He actually
because he just had that burning puzzle drive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He knew he'd fucked it up, and he thought about it, and he chased me down. And literally, that was the reason he got hired.
Wow.
Because of that. Because I was the decision maker on that, and everybody was like, "We like him." He was in between, and that tipped it over for him.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah,
but that stuff matters.
Yeah, because you're. It sounds like you're testing for analytical ability. You're testing for precision of inquiry, right? Which I think has a lot of is associated with that. And do they do the research, right? That's the other big part.
I was just listening to something that I really liked. There was a guy talking about music on TikTok. I love TikTok and I love reading about music. I love watching musical stuff and cooking stuff personally, and game stuff and cute.
Those are your categories. Nice. Okay.
Now those are my categories: cook talk and music talk. So this guy is like a Broadway singer. I'm not a fan of Broadway, but he talked about something interesting about getting better. He's like, you can get better. And there's also your ability to perceive your taste, your ability to say, when you're at the same level, you're happy with yourself. You're like, man, I'm kicking ass. I am singing this song so well because your taste is aligned with your skill. And he said, then there's this awful feeling where suddenly your taste improves, which can happen very quickly. I've had this experience myself as a pretty mediocre musician where suddenly you hear stuff you didn't before. And he's like, then there's this terrible grinding feeling where you're not at the level you want to be. And you sometimes just need time to grind it up. You almost don't want more feedback because you're off and you have to grind it up. And I want to see people who have good taste. I want to see people who know what to ask. Even if they don't know how to answer it yet, are they asking the right questions? Are they analyzing? Are they thinking what's important? Now, they may be wrong, but it's the kind of question. Is this somebody asking questions that say, this person in games cares about making something awesome? Because that is fundamentally, if they don't care about craft, they're not going to be good as a game maker.
Yeah.
Do they care about being awesome? Do they care about winning? And are they not a psychopath? Right?
Yeah.
Those are the three filters for every job. And the psychopath thing I joke about, but unfortunately, there are some folks that are so awkward. And I usually don't ask questions about that, except if someone really catches my eye as being odd.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That makes total sense. I love that breakdown.